The room went silent the second she spoke, not a soft silence, but the kind that snaps tight, like a held breath before something breaks. Her heels clicked once more on the marble floor as she stopped in front of him, eyes sharp, chin lifted, voice clear and cutting. "Are you lost?" she asked, loud enough for the echo to answer back. Every head turned, conversations died mid-sentence, a phone froze halfway to someone's ear. The black delivery boy stood there with a small brown package in his hands, her name printed clean across the label, sweat darkening the collar of his shirt, his chest rising slowly as if he were counting each breath. He had walked into buildings like this before, tall glass towers with polished floors and cold air, but this felt different. This felt like a trap snapping shut. Her tone wasn't curious, it wasn't confused. It was final, like she had already decided who he was and where he belonged. She looked him up and down again, slow this time, as if inspecting something that didn't meet her standards. Her lips curved into a thin smile, not kind, not cruel either, just certain. Certain that she had power here, certain that he didn't. She was young, stunning in a clean, effortless way, dressed in tailored white that screamed money without ever raising its voice. This was her building. Everyone knew that. Her face was on billboards downtown, in magazines at airport stands, a self-made millionaire before 30, a name people said with respect, sometimes envy, and now she was standing in front of him, laughing softly, shaking her head like the situation itself amused her. "This is a private building," she said, gesturing vaguely around them, as if the marble and glass were an extension of her body. "Deliveries go through the back." The words landed heavy, not loud, but sharp. The kind that leave marks you can't see. Heat rushed to his face, not from guilt, but from something deeper, something old. He opened his mouth to explain, to say he was exactly where he was supposed to be, but the words stuck in his throat. Around him, eyes lingered, some curious, some entertained, some uncomfortable but unwilling to step in. The security guard shifted his weight, hand brushing the radio at his side, already leaning toward the side of authority without a question asked. The delivery boy felt it all, the weight of the room, the judgment sliding over him like cold water. He had felt this before in stores, in elevators, in places where his presence was treated like a mistake. Still, he stood straight. He didn't flinch. He didn't lower his eyes. He just held the package tighter, grounding himself in its solid shape, reminding himself that he was here for a reason. She sighed then, crossing her arms, the sound loud in the quiet lobby. The sigh of someone inconvenienced, the sigh of someone used to being obeyed. "ID," she said, now. The lobby seemed to shrink, the ceiling felt lower, the walls closer. Time slowed in that strange way it does when a moment starts to define you. The guard took a step forward, not aggressive, just close enough to be a warning. The delivery boy could feel his heartbeat in his ears, steady but strong, like a drum that refused to panic. He had learned long ago that anger would only give them what they expected. Panic would confirm their assumptions. So he moved slowly, deliberately, reaching into his pocket as if every motion mattered. His hand didn't shake. Not because he wasn't nervous, but because he had practiced calm for years. Practiced it in rooms where he was underestimated. Practiced it when people spoke over him or through him as if he were invisible. He pulled out his wallet, worn at the edges, and paused for just a second. A small pause, not for drama, for control. She watched him closely now, impatience flickering across her face. In her mind, this was already over. A quick check, a quiet escort out the back. Another problem solved before her coffee got cold. She didn't see a man standing in front of her. She saw a role, a delivery boy who wandered too far forward, someone who needed to be reminded of boundaries. He slid the ID halfway out, still inside the wallet. The guard leaned closer. The air felt thick. The whispers that had started died again, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed against everyone's ears. Somewhere in the building, an elevator chimed, the sound distant and strange, like it belonged to another world. As he held the wallet there, his mind drifted not to fear but to memory, to his mother's voice telling him to always stand tall, to long nights on buses, watching city lights blur past, reminding himself that every step mattered, even the ones no one applauded. To the quiet promise he made to himself years ago, that no matter how small the uniform, he would never shrink inside it. She reached for the ID, her fingers manicured, confident, already bored. The delivery boy met her eyes for the first time. Not challenging, not pleading, just present, just human. For a split second something flickered there, not recognition, not yet, just the faintest hesitation, like a note slightly off. Key in a song she thought she knew by heart. Because she thought she understood this moment, she thought she was in control of it. She thought she knew exactly who he was. She had no idea she was standing at the edge of a story that would follow her long after this lobby emptied. No idea that the small piece of plastic she was about to see would crack something open inside her. No idea that power, real power, doesn't always announce itself with money or beauty or buildings that touch the sky. The delivery boy loosened his grip just enough for the ID to slide free, and as her eyes dropped toward it, the room seemed to hold its breath again, because the truth was about to step into the light. And nothing in that marble lobby would feel the same after. The whispers came fast once his hand dipped back into his pocket. They didn't try to hide them. They never did. Voices slipped through the air like needles, sharp and quiet, but impossible to ignore. Why is he even in here? Someone murmured from behind a marble column. Probably wandered in. Another voice added, softer but heavier. He doesn't look like he belongs. Each word stacked itself on his shoulders, light on its own, crushing together. The delivery boy heard every single one. He always did. Years of being overlooked had sharpened his hearing in ways no one talked about. When you are invisible long enough, you learn to listen for danger before kindness, judgment before mercy. He kept his eyes forward and placed the package down on the counter with care, as if the way he set it there mattered, as if gentleness could remind him who he was when the world tried to reduce him to nothing. The box made a soft sound against the marble, a small sound, but in that moment it felt loud, like a statement, like proof that he was real, standing there, breathing, existing whether they approved or not. The young millionaire glanced down at her phone, her perfectly shaped brow tightening. Her thumb scrolled, then tapped, then stopped. She looked up again with a sigh that carried irritation, not concern. "I don't have all day," she said, her voice clipped. "Some of us actually work." She didn't look at him when she said it. She looked past him like he was a delay, not a person. The words cut deeper than she knew. Not because they were new, but because they were familiar. Because she had no idea how many nights he'd worked without sleep, eyes burning, body aching, just to keep moving. She didn't know about the early mornings when the city was still dark and silent, when he pulled on his jacket and stepped outside because staying home wasn't an option. She didn't know about the miles he'd walked after buses stopped running, shoes worn thin, legs heavy, telling himself that tomorrow might be easier if he just didn't quit today. She didn't know how many times he'd swallowed his pride, nodded when he wanted to scream, smiled when he wanted to disappear, all in the name of survival. He felt the sting rise, sharp and sudden, but he pushed it down. He had learned how to do that too. Push it down, fold it away, keep moving. The security guard cleared his throat, finally stepping closer, his presence filling the space between them. "Sir," he began, his tone practiced, official, already leaning toward removal, "if you don't belong here." The sentence hung there, unfinished but clear enough. "I do," the delivery boy said quietly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it didn't echo, but it landed. It carried something steady and sure, something that made the guard pause mid-word. The guard blinked, surprised, not by defiance but by certainty. The boy's voice didn't shake, it didn't beg, it stated a fact, plain and simple, like the sky is blue or the floor is cold. For a brief moment the room shifted. Just a little. The young millionaire let out a small laugh, light and dismissive, as if the situation amused her again. She stepped closer, lowering her voice the way people do when they think they're being kind. "Listen," she said, tilting her head, her tone smooth and almost gentle. "Places like this aren't forgiving. You should be careful where you wander." The words were wrapped in false concern, but the message underneath was sharp. "Know your place, stay in it." The injustice thickened in the air. It pressed against his chest until each breath felt measured. Every second felt like another brick stacked on top of him, heavy and unfair. Still, he didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead his case like his dignity depended on her approval. He had learned that arguing with people who had already decided your worth was a losing game. Instead, he pulled his wallet from his pocket and opened it slowly. The leather was worn, softened by years of use. Inside were old receipts, a folded photo, and the ID she had demanded. He slid it out and placed it on the marble counter between them, right next to the package. The motion was calm, controlled, deliberate. Her smile was still there when she reached for it, confident, untouchable, the smile of someone who had never had to doubt their place in a room like this. Her fingers brushed the edge of the card, and for just a moment, time stretched again. The lobby felt like it was holding its breath, even if no one else realized it yet. Around them, the whispers faded into silence. People watched more openly now. Curiosity replaced judgment. The guard leaned back slightly, unsure. The delivery boy kept his hands at his sides, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Inside him, memories flickered like old film reels. Times he'd been questioned for simply standing still. Times he'd been followed through stores. Times he'd been asked to prove himself before being allowed to exist. Invisible until proven, always. She picked up the ID, glancing at it quickly at first, the way someone skims something they think doesn't matter. Her smile didn't move yet, not at first. She was still in control, still certain, still convinced this would end the way all moments like this ended. With her right and him gone, the delivery boy watched her face closely, not with hope, not with fear, but with patience. He had waited his whole life for moments like this to unfold, not because he wanted revenge, but because truth had a way of arriving on its own time. The guard shifted again, clearly uncomfortable now, his eyes darting between them. Someone behind the front desk stopped pretending to work. The air felt electric, charged with something no one could name yet. She read the card again, a little slower this time, her brows knit together, confusion flickering across her face. The smile faltered just slightly, like a crack in glass you don't notice until the light hits it right. She blinked and adjusted the card in her hand, angling it toward the lobby lights. The delivery boy's heart beat steady, calm, strong. He didn't move, he didn't speak. He let the silence do the work. For the first time since she'd spoken, she didn't look confident. She didn't look bored. She looked uncertain, the kind of uncertainty that creeps in when the story you've been telling yourself no longer makes sense. The whispers didn't return. No one laughed now. Even the hum of the building seemed quieter, as if the walls themselves were listening. She swallowed, eyes scanning the card once more, slower than before. Something about the name, the logo, the title printed beneath it, something that didn't fit the picture she had painted in her mind. Her fingers tightened around the ID, and in that tightening grip, in that growing pause, it became clear that the balance was shifting. Slowly, quietly, like a tide turning before anyone notices the water pulling back. Her smile was gone now, and the truth, heavy and undeniable, was just beginning to rise to the surface. The moment her eyes landed on the ID, something in her face broke. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know how to read power when it starts to slip. First came confusion, a small pause, a tightening around her eyes, then disbelief, sharp and sudden, like a door slammed shut in her mind, and then fear, real fear, the kind that drains warmth from the skin and leaves nothing but truth behind. She read the name once, her lips parted slightly, like she was about to say something, but forgot how words worked. She read it again, slower this time, her fingers tightened around the card, the edges pressing into her skin. The delivery boy watched quietly. He didn't smile, he didn't flinch. He had learned long ago that moments like this didn't need commentary. They needed space. The recognition didn't come from his face. It came from the logo stamped beneath his name. Clean, simple, powerful, a foundation she knew. An executive title she had seen on documents. A board member designation that had been spoken in rooms where decisions were made quietly and millions moved without sound. Her breath caught. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was collapse. This wasn't just an ID. It wasn't just proof of access. It was ownership. Her eyes flicked up for half a second, then back down again, like she was hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something safer. But they didn't. The truth stayed right where it was, bold and undeniable. The building she stood in, the one she had just claimed as her territory, had been partially funded by him. She remembered the meeting now. The quiet investor who didn't attend parties, the trust that stepped in when financing stalled, the name that carried weight without needing a face. She had never bothered to imagine what he looked like. The company she admired, the one she had studied and modeled parts of her own success after, was backed by his foundation. She remembered reading about it late one night, impressed by the way it focused on long-term impact instead of quick praise. She remembered thinking whoever ran it must understand struggle in a way money alone never taught. The delivery job, the uniform, the bag on his shoulder, that wasn't necessity, that was choice. Something inside her chest tightened painfully. Not just with embarrassment, but with understanding that came too late. He wasn't there because he had nowhere else to be. He was there because he wanted to be, because he chose to walk the same streets he once had, to stay grounded, to see the world from eye level instead of penthouses. To remember where he came from when the world tried to convince him he should forget. The lobby froze again, but this time it wasn't because of him. Her face drained of color so quickly it was almost shocking. The confident glow she carried moments ago vanished, replaced by something fragile and exposed. The security guard stepped back without being told, his posture changing instantly, respect snapping into place where suspicion had lived seconds before. The whispers died completely. No one dared to speak now. Eyes widened, spines straightened. The air itself seemed to shift, heavier and quieter, like the room had realized it made a mistake. I didn't know," she stammered. The words fell flat the moment they left her mouth, too small, too late. They echoed in the silence and came back empty. She had meant them as an apology, a shield, maybe even a plea, but all they did was reveal how little she had tried to know in the first place. The delivery boy finally spoke. "You didn't ask." His voice was calm, clear, not raised, not sharp, just honest, and that honesty landed harder than any insult ever could. The silence that followed hit like a weight. Heavy, unavoidable, no one moved, no one breathed too loudly, because in that silence everything was said. For the first time since he walked into the lobby, power shifted, not with shouting, not with threats. Not with revenge, with truth. He reached forward and took the ID gently from her hand. His fingers brushed hers for the briefest second. She flinched, not from anger, but from shame. He slid the card back into his wallet with the same care he'd used when he took it out. Then he picked up the package from the counter and held it out to her. "Your delivery," he said. 2 words, polite, professional, final. He nodded once, not in submission, not in victory, but in closure. Then he turned and walked away. The sound of his footsteps echoed across the marble floor, slow and steady. Each step felt louder than the last, not because he wanted attention, but because the room couldn't look away. He didn't rush, he didn't look back. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. Behind him, she stood frozen, package clutched in her hands, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. It wasn't heavy because of what was inside. It was heavy because of what it represented. Every assumption she'd made, every shortcut she'd taken, every time she'd mistaken position for character. People slowly returned to their tasks, but nothing felt the same. The guard swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the floor. The receptionist stared at her screen without seeing it. Somewhere, an elevator chimed again, but this time the sound felt distant, hollow. She looked down at the box again, then back toward the door he'd disappeared through. Her heart raced, not with anger, but with a question she couldn't escape. How many times had she done this before? How many people had she dismissed without a second thought? How many stories had she decided weren't worth hearing because they didn't fit her picture of success? The truth settled deep in her chest, uncomfortable and sharp. Power hadn't protected her in that moment. It had exposed her. Outside, the delivery boy stepped into the sunlight, the city noise rushing back around him. Cars passed, people moved, life continued like it always did. But something had changed, not for him, for her. He paused for just a moment, adjusting the strap on his bag, taking a breath. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel bitterness, he felt clarity, the kind that comes when you choose dignity over damage, when you let the truth speak instead of your anger. Inside the lobby, she still hadn't moved, and in that stillness, a lesson waited. One she couldn't undo, one she would have to carry, because sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when you take control. It's when you realize you never truly had it at all. She didn't sleep that night, not even for a moment. Every time she closed her eyes, the lobby came back, the marble floor, the echo of her heels, the sound of her own voice asking a question she could never take back. "Are you lost?" The way she'd laughed, the way she'd assumed, the way she'd dismissed a human being without even realizing she was doing it. The image replayed again and again, sharper each time, like her mind refused to let her soften it. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, the city lights blinking through the window like distant witnesses. Her phone sat untouched beside her. Messages came in, emails piled up, none of it mattered. For the first time in a long time, money didn't quiet her thoughts, status didn't protect her, power didn't help her sleep. She kept seeing his face, calm, still, not angry, not begging, just steady. The part that haunted her the most wasn't the ID. It wasn't the shock of realizing who he was. It was the moment before that, the moment when she thought she knew everything she needed to know just by looking at him. That was the part that made her chest tighten, because she realized something terrifying. If she could be that wrong once, she could have been that wrong many times before. Morning came without rest. The sun rose like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't shifted under her feet the day before. She dressed slowly, movements heavy, her reflection unfamiliar. The confidence she usually wore like armor felt thin now, exposed. She looked at herself and wondered how many people had seen this version of her long before she ever did. She made a decision before doubt could stop her. She requested a meeting, not through assistants, not through lawyers, direct, simple. She asked if he would come. No explanations, no excuses, just the request. When the time came, she arrived early. She stood in the same building, but this time the space felt different, smaller, quieter, honest. There were no cameras, no press, no audience waiting to see her perform regret. Just a room and a chair and the weight of what needed to be said. When he arrived, she stood. That alone surprised him. She didn't wait for him to speak. She didn't reach for control. She looked him in the eyes and apologized. Not a polished apology, not a rehearsed one, a real one, the kind that costs something to say. Her voice shook just slightly, but she didn't stop. She admitted she'd judged him, admitted she'd assumed. Admitted she'd been wrong. No titles, no defenses, just truth. He listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't nod. He didn't comfort her. He let her words exist in the room the way his silence once had. When she finished, there was a pause, long enough to feel uncomfortable, long enough to matter. Then he spoke. The world doesn't break people because they're weak, he said. His voice was calm, the same calm she remembered. It breaks them because others decide they don't matter. The sentence landed softly, but it stayed. It settled into her chest and didn't leave. Not that day, not the days after. It followed her into meetings, into hallways, into quiet moments when she caught herself about to speak before listening. That sentence changed how she led, slowly at first, then completely. She started noticing things she'd never noticed before. The way people stiffened when she walked into a room, the way voices lowered, the way eyes searched her face before words came out. She realized how often she'd mistaken silence for agreement, obedience for respect. She began greeting security by name, not because it looked good, but because she realized she'd never bothered to learn them before. She listened in meetings instead of talking over people. She asked questions and waited for answers. Real ones. She stopped assuming competence came dressed a certain way. She learned that dignity isn't worn, it's lived, and the delivery boy, he kept delivering, not because he needed to, because he chose to. He walked the city with the same steady steps, bag on his shoulder, eyes open. He spoke to people the way he always had, with respect, with patience. He didn't tell the story to impress anyone. He didn't need to. The lesson wasn't about what he owned. It was about who he refused to become when the world tried to shrink him. Sometimes when he passed that building, he looked up, not with pride, not with anger. Just awareness. He knew what moments like that could do to people. They could harden you, or they could sharpen you. She carried the lesson forward in ways no one applauded, in choices made quietly, in pauses before judgment. In moments when power could have spoken first, but didn't, because the greatest mistake isn't underestimating someone's wealth, it's underestimating their worth, and the world always finds a way to teach that lesson. Usually when you least expect it.